And here we are on March 2nd, 2016, another spoiler room, and it's another big 4-0 special. Yes, today, with the Academy Awards just have happened, I figured what more appropriate film to talk about than the film that was nominated, not won, but nominated for 4 Academy Awards, Robert De Niro's classic, Taxi Driver. And in the crew tonight to help me talk about this interesting dark film, we have first off Mr. Cole Meredith with us. Hello, Cole.
Hello, Mark. Thanks for having me, man.
Glad you could be here. And next to him, it is the BFD, the one, the only, Mr. Glenn Bittner. Hello, Glenn. How are you?
Are you talking to me?
Oh, brother.
Yeah, I'm fine.
I'm glad someone dropped the line. And next to him is the spoiler room regular, the man himself, Mr. Movieocrity. We have Mr. Scotty D. Scott Davis. Hello, sir. How are you?
Listen, you fuckers, you pussy. Oh, wait, maybe I shouldn't drop that line.
Wow.
Maybe I shouldn't drop a line from this movie. I'm fine.
That's good to hear. And tonight, yes, we are talking about the Martin Scorsese classic, Taxi Driver, which, for those few of you out there who may not know, according to IMDb, the summary reads like this. A mentally unstable Vietnam War veteran works as a nighttime taxi driver in New York City. New York City! And where the perceived decadence and sleaze feeds his urge for violent action, attempting to save a pre-adolescent prostitute in the process. Well, he doesn't exactly set out initially to do that. He's got something more dark in mind, which also makes this film appropriate for this time of year. We're in a political season. And Cole, Mr. Bickle, what do you think of Mr. Robert De Niro's character here? We really have no heroes in this film, do we?
No, man. There aren't any. And it's funny. I think a lot of people see him as a hero. I mean, I know a lot of people do. You just get that impression when you read about this movie a lot. You see a lot of people see him as this gentleman who is sort of driven unstable by society, which is not the case. I was actually surprised at how disturbed he is from the get-go watching this again. I hadn't seen it in a long time, and just a lot of things that are automatically off about him, like the fact that he watches pornography, but yet sex seems to disgust him. You know, and the obvious scene where he takes his date to watch pornography, which is
because that's where you want to go for your. That's where you want to go for your first date, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's just so strange, and I guess the movie's so complex that you can't begin to cover it all by summarizing it. But really, you don't know if maybe he was driven crazy in the war. I mean, a lot of people don't really realize that a lot of veterans, especially then, they come back with murderous souls. They're killers. They come back as killers. So you don't know, if he's killed anybody in the war. He certainly shoots that robber who's, going after the Quick Mart attendant with ease. It doesn't seem like he's any stranger to death. What struck me this time, maybe it's just the fact that that we're living in this age where the whole gun control thing is prominent, but his character completely changes once he buys those guns. Mm-hmm. I mean, he really gets this sense of self-entitlement, and he just builds himself up to be tougher and tougher than he is, almost to the point where he's talking about getting healthy, right, and not taking these pills, and you see these workouts he's doing, and some of them are impressive, but other times he's just like staring at his muscles. He's just sitting there kind of flexing his arm, and you kind of wonder, like the unreliable narrator, how in shape he's getting. I mean, a couple scenes later, he's drinking beer and downing pills again. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the guy's off his rocker. I mean, I could go on forever and ever. I was reading a little bit before the show about how some people think like the final scene is a dream sequence or whatever, which I think that's, to me, that doesn't resonate as true. But again, it does make you wonder how true the ending is. Like, it's almost like his own self delusion of where he is in society. Like everything would be okay once he righted all these wrongs. You know, he's got his friends now. He's not disconnected. He gets to sort of wink at the girl he loves or the girl he's attracted to, and leave her in his bus. And it's almost like this oddly perfect ending until, of course, he catches something in the rear view and the credits roll. But you really wonder, yeah, you just wonder about the character. He's not a hero, but you really just wonder. I mean, there's no center to the guy. I mean, he is a true psychopath. I mean, there's no center to him. He's all over the place.
Well,
what he is disgusts him, you know.
Well, when you get introduced to him right away, you get the feeling that he's off because he approaches that taxi driver boss, and you can tell he deliberately needles him, and he smiles at the fact that he upsets the guy a little.
Yeah.
You know, almost like that kid who pokes the snake or whatever, and the snake gets upset, and he kind of smiles at the fact that he's poking at the snake or the animal, you know. Travis Bickle here, Glenn, for him, what did you think of this character? He is not a hero, and you know, what is your impression with him?
Well, I mean, knowing the history of the character, the fact that he is a Vietnam vet, and yeah, it's I don't know if I'd say he's a psychopath, but I don't know, maybe he is. But I mean, he's definitely off, and a lot of that I think is just from it's that isolation so many veterans felt after the war.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yes, they have that killer mentality, but it's also the fact that you go from being in wartime where you've always got those guys who got your back, and you're part of something more than just you. There's always you're never alone. You're always in a group of people, and they come back and you lose all that. And I think a big part of it is the fact that part of what drives him crazier is he's sad because of his loneliness,
Mm-hmm.
but a lot of his loneliness he causes himself.
Mm-hmm.
So it's this kind of self-perpetuating cycle of the fact that he withdraws himself intentionally, which then makes him lonely, which makes him sad, which then causes him to withdraw even more. He's a very, very interesting character, and it's a very interesting study on. I believe I was reading. They said it's the writer originally said he thought he was just doing a story about loneliness, and it's more about, he said, the pathology of loneliness,
Mm-hmm.
as well as being apparently semi-autobiographical of the author as well, or the screenwriter, I should say. So it's a very interesting character in that whole, as I said, the pathology of loneliness.
Yeah, I like that the pathology of loneliness, because you can see that he kind of contributes to his own self-destruction in a lot of ways.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You know, you make you wonder a little bit still if it's deliberate or not. You know, because he's got it's almost as if he doesn't realize some of these social norms aren't actual, that he thinks are social norms aren't. You know, Cole brought up specifically bringing your first date to a porn. I mean,
Yeah, what was the
Now,
big
to be
fucking...
fair, I think that was their second time going out.
that's true. Okay, yes, first
So-
time they went for pie and coffee.
That's a little no.
You know, I
Almost
don't get what the fucking
for a
big
second
deal
date.
is. That was a classy flick. There were subtitles. There were subtitles in that. It was instructional.
And Scott, Mr. Travis Bickle, do you think it was more loneliness? Do you think that he pictured himself a hero, or is he a psychopath in true form?
It's like as you know, Cole and Glenn both were so profound on this that I mean, I'm honestly going to be like just saying leftovers, I think, because they were just so dead on. It's a little too simplistic to say if it's one or the other.
Mm-hmm.
This is one of the most complex people of the on screen. I'm gonna just preface this by saying, everybody asks people like, what, if you're a movie fan of films, if you're a film geek or whatever, people are gonna ask you what your favorite movie is, and we see so many movies, we see thousands of movies. How do you pick them? But my stock answer is Taxi Driver.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen this film well over 100 times.
Wow.
And there was a there was a part of my life in which this was seen at least once a week, because it was he is not a hero at all.
No.
Some people do. Cole is correct in saying that some people do see him as a hero, which is a mistake. No one should be trying to emulate this character. Well, I think you have to say that because I think there are people who are. I think we and I think we see them in the news every day. But this is absolutely about loneliness. It's about loneliness, about self-isolation. Glenn's absolutely correct when he brings up the pathology of loneliness that Paul Schrader touched upon. Because at one point the guy says, "I do not think that it is right for someone to be obsessed with morbid self-interest. I think I think someone should become a person like other people." Well, he may say that, he may even write that in his journal, but he sure as shit doesn't act like it. Because everything he does, he is torn. He's caught in this endless cycle of misery and self-doubt and loneliness and misery and depression. And he's racist. He wants to be part of the world, and yet he looks at the world, or he purposely goes into the absolute seediest parts of the world, and therefore looks at the world with disgust. He keeps trying to capture some sort of purity and purpose in the world, and he can't do it. And even when he thinks he does it, it's a nightmare. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's not. I don't know if he is a psychopath. Is a kind of a very specific type of mental illness.
Yeah, I may have misspoke with that.
No. I mean, because as Mark was asking about it too,
mm-hmm.
And a lot of people call him a psychopath. I think that's a very specific form of mental illness. He is definitely mentally ill. I think part of it comes from his upbringing, which we never really hear about totally, but we can kind of get hints about. He's delusional. I think he was touched by the war. He's not educated, and he feels very self-conscious about that. And I think all of that, combined with this anger, this mistrust, and this just constant cycle where he keeps telling himself that he's trying to better himself, but he always self-sabotages himself. I think it all kind of just leads to this endless pool. And it doesn't stop. Mm-hmm. The ending of this film, you think, oh, okay, well, and there's some people who think that it's in his head, and there's some people who say it's not, even people on the crew. It's not very clear. But, I mean, it's what he's fine. And he seems, I'm okay now, until when? Until he gets the reflection of himself in the mirror and he has to turn away because he can't bear to be staring at his own self because he still sees that sickness inside of him. It's a little too simplistic. He's just such this, God's lonely man, as he quotes in the movie. And there was a very good time. There was a time when I did see a lot of I will always see a lot of myself in this character. Mm. I'm not a racist. I'm not violent, for the record. Are
the FBI going to be listening to the podcast?
No.
Put you on the watch list?
I'm just saying that because of people who say that, he's got plus like that. But I think that sense of loneliness and isolation and being socially awkward, feeling that you are apart from the world, and feeling that history keeps repeating itself. I saw this movie even though I'd seen over 100 times. This is my first time watching it in about 5 years because I kind of thought, okay, I'm a little different person right now from the person I used to be, in which I would actually go into the seediest parts of the neighborhood. I would just walk the streets endlessly at night, almost with some sort of death wish, almost inviting, any kind of, confrontation at one point. And now I'm like, don't think of myself as like that. But 5 minutes with this movie, and I was like, oh hi, yeah, I've seen, I remember you. Hi, oh no, yep, nope, make yourself at home. You know where everything is.
Well,
And it was like, it was like that thing all over again because I think that's what makes the film so special is that he's mentally touched. He's saying, but to a certain degree, I think a lot of people can see parts of Travis Bickle in them.
Well, I mean, he is he's a really complex character for cinema. I mean,
Oh yeah.
he's got so many layers and different. He's a walking contradiction for one thing. I mean, like all three of you have already put it well. He talks about the sleaze of the city, yet he goes to a porn theater where most people consider that a sleazy, especially back then. I mean, the screen barely is all burned out, and I mean,
that was an optical. They had to do it because they were actually showing the movie while he was walking through the theater.
Yeah.
And so he says, yeah, it's the one optical in the movie. Scorsese said we had to send that to the lab and say, could you blur that out? And it's this up close penetration shot.
But I think it actually,
they were not happy about that. Apparently.
I think it adds to it though. It adds to the grime of the city. I mean, let's face it. This movie's a sleazy movie.
Oh yeah.
It takes place in the not pleasant parts of New York. A lot of people think of New York glam and glitz, but it's Martin Scorsese who has a love for New York. He's if you look in a lot of his films, he's come forward as much as saying how much he loved. But here, it almost felt like he was giving the true identity of the city, going, no, this isn't Frank Sinatra singing down, Times Square. This is Travis Bickle drinking a flask of whiskey in the dirtiest part of town where the taxi cab, garage is.
And it's probably the best, for people who love to see snippets of like what the old 42nd Street and everything looked like. This is probably about the best you're going to get in a movie is a look at that. And this is like kind of like my New York, the one that I remember from when I was a really little kid and stuff. The one that's not there anymore, incidentally. So.
Yeah. But he's not the only.
Thanks, Giuliani.
Yeah. Yes, lives were saved, but come on, atmosphere.
So yeah, Travis Bickle, he surprises you at every turn, where he's narrating, and we get this noir feel for this film of him doing the voiceover and talking about the filth and the scum. It feels like. For me, it feels like he didn't have a lot of education. He went into the Army, and I bet you he was probably a great soldier. I mean, he got honorably discharged. But I have a feeling he was a very, followed the rules and everything type of soldier because that was the type of structure he had. And I think that fit best for him. But here he gets out into the real world, and, they're covering the subject. They don't mention it in here, but it's obviously there's also some PTSD going on with his character, I think. Wouldn't you say, Glenn? Something that's a popular topic today and very much in the news.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's where a lot of this comes from. Is from his post-traumatic stress disorder. There's obviously something behind his mental illness, and that's probably the most likely source.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. There's something about the character that just makes me think that he was always socially awkward. That's just always kind of been there. But the whole kind of break from reality, I think that's a result of his PTSD.
Yeah, and that's the impression I got with it too. Now that they know more about it and the symptoms and that, and you look at his character, you're like, wow, yeah, he's really suffering at least part from that. Part he may have already had some issues before going into the military, but they were compounded once he left the military. So he's just a complex character that you could sit and do, and I'm sure people have papers on just him, of the different things that he goes through. But the characters around him too, we don't really get a lot of It didn't never felt like a bunch of stereotypical characters around him. I mean, you've got Peter Boyle, who's only in a few scenes, but he plays the Wizard. They call him the Wizard, and you get his character and the other cabbies who call.
Uh-oh.
And I thought thought it was an interesting parallel. They call Bickle Killer.
Yeah.
No, they call him Killer because they murder, and I thought that was a bit creepy. But what do you think of the other taxi cab drivers, Glenn, around him? Do you think they were accepting of Bickle? Do they think they were a little standoffish of the guy, or?
I think they were probably about as accepting as the type of guys that they can be.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's their work buddies. They probably don't hang out much outside of work. They probably think he's a little odd, but they're also, used to that kind of stuff because they're cab drivers in New York.
That's true. And Peter Boyle's character, the Wizard, he acts like he gives some advice. You get that one scene where he's giving Bickle advice, and then he's like, "Yeah, but what do I know? I'm a taxi driver."
Yeah.
For 17 years, which is impressive. And then you get his love interest, which I don't know if there's maybe a bit of a metaphor in here, Scott, about some kind of male, say, sexual whatever. But I mean, our Bickle goes from obsession to obsession. First, it's he's just obsessed about work, but then he runs across a Sybil Shepherd's character, and suddenly he's obsessed about her and wants to get together with her. I mean, he moves from obsession to obsession, doesn't he?
Oh yeah, it's as cheesy as it sounds today. It's this search for purity,
Mm-hmm.
and he sees, this uptown woman who looks, very glamorous and very sweet and everything like that, and he tries to dress himself up nicely to meet her and everything like that, and he introduces himself to her, and it's this idea to treat her thing. Now, whether he was ignorant of it or not, he of course sabotages this when he takes her to a double feature of Sometimes Sweet Susan and Swedish Marriage Manual, but and of course she blows him off, and eventually he's like, well, she's just like the rest. And what does he replace it with? Well, at first he replaces it with kind of a means to kill. Paul Schrader said he was thinking of killing her father figure, being the senator.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually he replaces that with trying to save this 12-year-old prostitute. And all of these things are connected in that it's his attempt to make a statement and stake a claim on some sort of purity in the universe, whether that's real or imagined. I mean, she was never this ideal that he made her out to be. So the Sybil Shepherd character, Betsy, never was, but he made her out to be that. I mean, it's like it's the way where he narrates and talks about, I ordered the apple pie, the cheese, and everything like that, and she had this coffee and a donut or whatever, but she could have had anything she wanted. He really tries to push things too far because expects. I don't know what he expects more or whatever. He's just this very obsessed person.
Well, and like I said, I got a little bit of the feeling of whatever either urge or something he was looking to be fulfilled. And I mentioned sexual earlier, but maybe not so much that. But he's looking to fill something, some hole in his life, because first he thinks it's work, and then work's not really doing it. He's not really liking that. Then he comes across Betsy, and he thinks she's the one that he wants, but then she turns him down. So then he is looking at getting violent and he thinks being fulfilled by serving a purpose of shooting the presidential candidate named Palpatine. Palantine, which
You're thinking of Star Wars.
I'm thinking. No, well, I kept thinking of Palpatine, and I'm like, Palantine, Palpatine. Come on.
Good, Travis. Let the hate flow through you.
But then he, that falls through. So then, I don't know, Cole. Is he really going to rescue her, or is he going to fulfill his urge in some way, shape, to extract, to dole some violence out on somebody, more so than rescue her?
Yeah, I don't think it has to do with the rescue. Having just finished it again, I think it was interesting actually listening to some of the senator's speech this time around, and it sounds like he was on the right track. I mean, I would vote for the guy. I mean, seriously, if you listen to what he's saying,
feel the burn.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. He's talking power back to the people. I mean, that's his whole speech, is we've got to give the power back to the people, unless I misheard something.
No, that was his whole thing, because their slogan is "We are the people." We the people. No, we are the people.
Okay, we are the people.
Yeah, no.
We are the people.
We are the people. I love Albert Brooks. Has got a great comedic character in there. He's probably one of the lighter points in there, and there's that great conversation he has at the beginning, folks, where he's talking about buttons and being underlined and how they weren't going to pay for him because they underlined "we" instead of "are" in their phrase "we are the people." So he's like, "We are the people" is different than "we are the people."
Let's not fight.
But no, you're right.
I mean, I don't think there's any ideal behind what he's doing. I mean, he's obviously. You say it's an urge. I guess I wonder how virginal the character is. I mean, if he went to war as a boy, it's possible he's entirely sexually confused. I mean, there's certainly that possibility also. Yeah, you're right. He's definitely looking to fulfill something. Scott refers to a tent pole of purity, which I also see. I mean, he mentions this immediate connection he had with Sybil Shepherd's character, and he says, tell me now if I'm crazy or something to that effect. And she says, well, I wouldn't be sitting across from you if you were wrong. So, I mean, she sees it at first too, but again, he's just too out there, man, especially with the sexual stuff. He seems to have some deeply repressed issues there that are coming to play, and other issues too with the guns. I mean, he's got many there's no motive behind what he's doing, like you guys have said better than me. I mean, he's going to end up going on some sort of rampage at some point, because there's nowhere else for his brain to go.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not at peace with himself at all.
No, and he can't find peace. I mean, Glenn, do you think if Betsy had accepted going out on that date and stuck with him, do you think she would have been good enough for him, or do you think he would have eventually needed something else more to fulfill him, or that what you're talking about, the loneliness?
I think if she would have actually gone out with him again and stayed with him, he would have started to see, the fact that, God, she's really fucked up. Because, I'm really fucked up and she's still with me. So she's part of the problem. I mean, I don't think it was doomed no matter what happened.
Sure.
And I think it's doomed because, as I said before, his self-imposed isolation, in a lot of ways, he wants to not be that way, but I think he, in a way, needs to be that way.
Or he's comfortable that way, actually. I think if he started getting something normal, quote unquote normal, I think he would he feels uncomfortable with that. He feels more comfortable in his loneliness than not, which is weird. Even though it's something he doesn't want, yet he's actually happier there.
Well, it's a pain as opposed to the fear of other pain that you don't know. this is it's a pain he's comfortable with. He knows how to exist with that pain.
Scott, Cole brought up a good point. Do you think maybe our Bickle was virginal? Not only that, but possibly came from a rather conservative family?
I know he probably came from a conservative family. He probably came from a small town, and honestly, that would be the best place for him right now. As much as I'm a fan of cities, this guy needs to be in a nice small town where he's not looking at this degradation around him, and he can just get a job at the corner store or whatever. But and just live a life, and actually maybe even meet a girl from the town or something. But that was actually one of the we were going to bring questions and stuff. That was actually one of my questions I was going to ask people, was what you think is sexual thing is. Being at Vietnam and knowing what you hear about the soldiers who went there, a lot of them, I'm sure he probably eventually hooked up with some, prostitute in Vietnam or something. I can see that character doing that, and I can see that character not knowing what the hell to do. Because I think that he's still very awkward and stuff. When he came back, he might be impotent for all we know, because he hangs out in the theaters a lot. You never see him tossing one off or anything like that. Well, not that we want to, but you never see it. But you never really see it either. And he never seems to have a sexual motivation with the Betsy character. It kind of seems much more like traditional, when we're in the Surrey with the fringe on top type of relationship, but he, so, and I think that but I think a lot of sexual frustration actually helps, is kind of it's rarely spoken about. But I think it's an undercurrent in there. And what do you see? What happens at the end? He has this bloodbath, this massacre and stuff, where he makes his claim, and and then he's finally fine afterwards. Why? Because he came. Because he came, if you're on edge, if you're on edge for long enough, whether once you get your rocks off, whether it's with a partner or with somebody or with yourself or anybody else, once you do, you're like, okay, now I can get some work done, and you're fine for a little while, until shit starts to really start to freak you out again. And I think I think that there is kind of that kind of symbolism there. I think he's very socially awkward. I think he's very sexually inexperienced. I think he's if he had any sexual experience beforehand, I think it was probably a disaster. And honestly, I think he might be post-war a little impotent, honestly.
Sure. That's where I was leading with that, is that you almost feel like that, it might be there. Again, it doesn't come up, but there's some undertones there that you can't really miss, especially that bloodbath at the end. Speaking of questions with this, Cole, did you happen to bring a question that you might want to address or you'd like to talk about, something in particular?
We actually talked about him. I mean, I was gonna talk about the history of war with the character, and I was also gonna ask whether or not you guys thought that when he bought all the guns, it escalated his deterioration, the deterioration that was already happening.
Well, we can go back to that, because that's actually, even though it doesn't seem like a big point, it seems like he does change after he buys those guns, or while he's buying those guns.
Yeah.
Definitely. So yeah, I think personally, I think that does change him more than anything, because he's getting back to something that's comfortable for him. I mean, this whole time we've all talked about it and touched on it, how he's not really comfortable in this city. He's not comfortable in his place right now. He's looking for something. And so now he finds a sales guy who is a classic sales guy. I mean, the character selling the guns is hilarious.
Your Cadillac.
That guy improv'd most of his lines. He was just like a fan of Scorsese's.
Yeah,
or like a friend of Scorsese's, rather, or something.
I read that. I read that they just kind of gave him the suitcase full of stuff, and he's just starting to, yeah, 44 Magnum. You could crack a block of a engine block with that thing. They hunt elephants in Africa with that.
It was a great part. It's completely believable. It really was believable that this is the guy who's going to hook you up with illegal, like, stolen cars, guns, a meth, whatever, you know. And what's he look like? Used fucking car salesman.
Yeah.
But his character, you're right, Cole. I think his character does change, and I think it's because he's finding something that he's comfortable with, that he knows from when he was in the war, which is a gun. He doesn't start out with a gun, but eventually he feels the need to get not just one gun. He gets like all varieties of guns, you know, and I think that puts him back in a little bit of a comfort level, wouldn't you say, Glenn? When he starts getting those guns, his character seems a bit more confident.
Oh yeah, I mean, when you can't get it up, nothing's better than a good old gun in your hand.
There you go.
Especially a big gun, right?
Yeah.
There you go.
No, it's obviously a huge ego boost for him because it's power. It's he's not used to having power, which is probably something he misses from the war, because he had that power basically over life and death. When you're a soldier, you have that kind of power, and he doesn't have that now. But he gets these guns, and all of a sudden now he's a big fucking man again. Or he's just a man, period, again. It's like a restoration of his manliness after being rejected.
Yeah, because definitely Betsy's rejection of him just kind of sends him off and wanting to do bad things, as he puts it. Now, halfway through this film, pretty much halfway through, we finally get introduced to the Iris character, Jodie Foster's character, who she was only 15.
12.
Her character was
12.
She was 12.
Was she 12? Really?
I think she was 4.
No, she was 12.
I'm gonna look it up, but I thought she was like 14 when she did what she was playing.
Oh, when they were shooting the film, she might have been. But I mean, still, she's very young in here.
Yeah.
And if I'm wrong, I'll say so.
Man, let me tell you, this whole film, from watching it from start to finish, you just feel uncomfortable.
She would have been, when they actually were shooting it.
Mm-hmm.
When they were actually shooting it, she would have been 13. So compromise between the two.
Yeah. Close. But you just feel uncomfortable, and then you get her character, and then you're just like, oh my God, what role is she in? But there's the one scene in there where they're at the cafe, and she's sitting with him, and he's asking her why she's doing this. And I was starting to get just a little bit of the professional vibe going on. I wanted these two to pick up a gun and go on a killing spree. Scott, what about you? It's an interesting relationship that Travis, I mean, is he trying to, instead, he couldn't be a boyfriend to Betsy, so is now he trying to be a parent to Iris?
Oh, sure. And, let's just say also, the same year that Jodie Foster did this, she played kind of a very suggestive character in the G-rated Bugsy Malone. So she played way too many whores for a 13-year-old that year. All love to Jodie Foster. I think she's one of the greatest actresses ever. One of the greatest actors, period.
Mm-hmm.
But no, absolutely. And it goes back to the whole purity thing. And yeah, I mean, if you look, she even tries to get him into like this corner where she's basically they don't have to do anything when they're in that apartment together. He's paying already, right?
Yeah.
When he sets up to meet her for the first time, they don't, and she's still like throwing herself at him because it's become more comfortable for her than to actually hear, what are you doing with your life? And I think it says a lot that the only scene we ever have of any that does not include Travis Bickle is afterwards when we see that she does not like what she's doing. She is kind of really, she hasn't been completely lost to the streets, and she is being influenced by this sleazeball pimp of hers. Yeah, he's absolutely trying to be a father figure, but he's so fucked up. He can never be a father figure. What he is he winds up being this person who tries to save her, whether she 100% wants to be saved or not. And probably if she did want to be saved, she didn't want it like that. She's horrified. She's going to be in therapy for the rest of her goddamn life. I'm serious. I mean, come on. I mean, if you have, somebody pour his heart out to you and then offer to take you for, breakfast, and then the next time you see him, he's got a buzz cut and he's blowing everybody away around you. I mean, that's some scarring stuff compared to what she did on the streets. So he's not equipped to be that person, but it is how he generally makes his statement and everything. And even if it is, I'm sure at much cost, I'm sure she's going to have a real messed up life. I mean, you can't be untouched by these events before or after Travis Bickle entered her life. But if he did any good in the movie, it was that,
Right.
Although I'm not positive that's 100%. Let's face it, his motives weren't entirely unselfish.
Well, no, it's the gratification of violence is what he really went for. Let's face it, Glenn, this is the Mafia running this pimp ring because Harvey Keitel's character, who's the pimp for Iris, has to answer to someone as well, too, right? We got Mafia involved, don't we?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, those guys were like stereotypical. The guy at the hotel room, and then the guy getting the money from what's his name? Harvey Keitel's
I thought he was just a seedy pimp. I think the Mafia would be a lot. I think their girls would be a lot more.
Well, I don't know. I felt like it was almost like a side business. But I mean, the fact that he had someone he had to pay, I thought was a little bit of an interesting moment. I mean, it's only a short scene, but it puts a little bit in perspective the business that's being run on the streets there.
Oh, sure. I mean, exploitation. This is exploitation everywhere.
Right.
Every single character in this movie is exploited in one way or another.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the Betsy character is even exploited as far as, in some ways, with the candidate that she's supporting. So, and she's dark too. There's nothing but really dark characters except maybe Albert Brooks's character in this film. Wouldn't you say, Cole, that there's probably pretty much each character is pretty much dark except maybe that character, Albert Brooks's character, the guy who wants to be with Betsy?
Yeah, for sure, man. He was a moment of levity. I mean, I don't know the senator that well either.
Right.
Again, you can't. I guess you shouldn't really trust what a politician says, at least not right up front or right away. But again, his speech struck me as okay. Don't shoot him. I mean, Christ. I keep going back to that because it totally robbed Robert De Niro's character of all heroism. I mean, he's psychopathic. The guy is. I just didn't realize that when I watched it when I was younger. Just how completely unhinged he is. It's like the death of all of those pimps is a MacGuffin. It's a total mind fuck. But anyways, yeah, the movie is just filled with shady characters and shady people, and I love how Harvey Keitel has somebody to answer to. I love that. I love that little moment. I think it's totally significant because, as you said, everybody's being exploited, but it also gives you if you're willing to think about it, gives you a brief moment of insight into how under control the city really is, how under control the element of this sleaze is. I mean, try running from it. Try running from it if you're Jodie Foster. Try running from it if you're Harvey Keitel. They're going to find him and whatever, do their worst to him. So I thought that was a horrifying moment. I left that post online on our private page that said this movie is horrifying. I was just probably 15 minutes past that scene, but it really started to get to me. It really started to. And again, that might be a little trick to get you on De Niro's side too. It's like fuck it all. It's an amazing film. Yeah, filled with shady characters, and I love Albert Brooks.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's part really with it's Scorsese's direction of this film because he doesn't really let you up at all. I mean, there's no real light moment. You're following this crazy person, Bickle, and you're getting the intricacies of his life. I mean, some films, you see the crazy guy, but then you'll cut away. We never really leave Bickle's side, do we, Scott?
Not except for that one scene, no. Not except for that one little, like, about a 2-minute scene between Sport and Iris. We don't. No, we stay with him, and that's what makes the movie so painful. It's like, it's just brutal. It's just brutal as hell. And, everybody has their something in this movie, though. I mean, we follow this person, we get to know this person, and we get to see the way he looks at the world. But oh man, I want to say that there's this old friend, this friend of mine. I'm going to say his whole name because unfortunately he's no longer with us. Todd Sarn, a good friend of mine. He's no longer with us, but he had this one thing where he was studying this movie at one point for a class, and I don't know if this was from something that he read or something that he came up with. But he mentioned the use of altars in the film. I'm like, what are you talking about, man? Altars. He says, well, look at this. I mean, you'll see it like when Bickle is in the taxi in the diner with the other taxi people, and he like has the Alka-Seltzer, and he escapes by looking into the Alka-Seltzer and like shuts out like the rest of the city. That's that isolation. That's his altar. Then he goes to meet Betsy, and he like kind of waves his hand across her desk, and they focus on the desk, and he's dismissing how phony her altar is. And then they have other things like the flowers that are briefly in his apartment. That's a false altar. And what's the ultimate altar at the end? The blood-soaked seedy apartment room that we just slowly pan across and down. That is his altar. That is his altar. And I mean, we stay with this character so long, and until we get to see that one defining moment, and then find out towards the end where we think, wow, this is odd. This is an oddly optimistic ending for this person who should be considered like this, like he should be in prison. He should be in prison, but he's considered a hero, which it really isn't that far from what would happen. I mean, if you remember what happened a few years, like about maybe 5 or 10 years after this, Bertie Getz. It was a similar thing in New York City. He was turned into a hero by a lot of people. All these things, but then you think, wow, that's an oddly optimistic ending with him, actually having the little goodbye to Betsy, haha, I'm over you, and then, oh no, look what this is this bit of uncertainty, it's all going to happen again, because it's this cycle, and we are trapped with him during this cycle. It's, and it's really more, it's so amazing that this is like a under 2-hour movie. It's so tight because this script is just like the tightest thing ever, because this is like one of the most introspective movies you're likely to come across, And we're stuck with this guy for the whole time, and it is misery.
it is, and I mean, and that's uncomfortable because as you get to know him, you're getting familiar with him, and that's part of Scorsese's directing with this film, is he leads you to, just as you start feeling, hey, I'm kind of digging this guy, he does something that you're just like, oh God, no. I mean, you hear him talking to Betsy and whatnot. I mentioned it, uncomfortable. I mean, you just feel uncomfortable for this guy because he's so awkward in almost every situation he's in. that you're just like, oh, I just, oh man, dude, it's like, don't take her to the adult movie. What's wrong with you, man? Don't sit there, don't go in the campaign office and start throwing a fit. This is New York. um,
He sabotages himself constantly.
he does, and it's just, he really makes you feel uncomfortable though, throughout, and you're supposed to. You're not really supposed to be, I think, complacent or comfortable as you watch this film. You should be bothered by it, and I think it succeeds in that quite a bit. Glenn, did you have any point or anything that you wanted to talk about that we haven't maybe already touched on?
No, I mean, we've pretty much hit on it. I mean, the only thing is that I do admire the amount of ad-libbing that is done in this film.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we talked about the whole thing with the gun dealer, how that was pretty much all ad-libbed. His whole scene in front of the mirror is all ad-libbed.
Yeah.
Where, I mean, the script just said, Bickle stares into the mirror. That's all the script said.
Yeah.
Wow, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
De Niro ad-libbed all that stuff.
Holy shit, that's awesome, Glenn. Wow.
Yeah. The "you talking to me" thing was apparently one of those things where he just started saying and like just talking to the mirror and saying, "You talking to me?" And Martin Scorsese's like, "Yeah, if you could just like," and he kind of realized later on, like, oh, he's not talking, he's in the zone. It was a very Danny isn't here right now, Mrs. Torrance moment. And like De Niro. De Niro does so many parts that are beneath him these days.
Yeah.
And that it's easy to forget that even if you see him do like a 17th Fockers movie, that genius doesn't leave you. This guy is the real frickin' deal. And he created one of the most amazing characters, as uncomfortable as we are in his skin,
Yeah, he does, and this film, I see, it's a classic, and it's funny, it was nominated for 4 Academy Awards, but what did it lose to? Another disturbing film from the same year, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. What was it about 1976, folks? I don't know, but it did get
crazy people.
I was going to say, it got nominated for 4, and De Niro was just coming off of his Godfather Part 2 performance. I do believe that was the year before, wasn't it? Before Taxi Driver.
It was while they were filming this.
Okay, so
because the studio did not was losing faith in the film, and they thought De Niro might pull out because he was getting paid $35,000 for this, and when he won the Oscar, of course, his fame went way up. And they were thinking that he would demand more money, but he said, "No, I'll do the job I was told to do because this way the movie gets made." Because if he wanted more money, the studio was going to shut down production.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
So he basically honored his contract, which is what let this movie be made.
Wow, that's impressive. And I'm sure it helped, but this film is just his character is so different in this versus in Godfather 2 that I'm sure it may have shocked some audience members as well. And then there's that musical score in here from Bernard Herrmann, which has that famous story where Bernard was asked to for one more day's work after he made the entire original score, and they put in like a whole day's. He came home and he passed away.
Yeah.
I mean, like the night he finished, this was his last official score, though he's been credited later on. This was his, which is weird, but the music fits in here, I thought, quite a bit and helped added to the feeling of Bickle's character and the emotions that he goes through. So, the Taxi Driver is a very complex, dark film. This is not light watching. to say the least. But we're going to wrap it up here, I think, for this film tonight. We'll go down the line here really quick and just get final thoughts with Taxi Driver. I keep wanting to say Taxi Cab Driver. Taxi Driver, and kind of who you would recommend this film to. Cole, we'll start with you. Your final thought and feeling with this film, and who you might recommend it to.
Wow, who I would recommend it to? I mean, lots and lots of people. I would think, if you're a fan of the craft of film, this is one of those must see experiences. They don't make them like this anymore, and they really don't. I mean, the thing came out before I was born, but it's so influential. I mean, I see it in everything. I see it in Fight Club. I see it in True Romance. I mean, I see echoes of this film in all popular movies, all cult movies. Well, not all, but many, many. I see it. It sort of defines that niche where it's like, you're up late at night with one of your friends and who hasn't seen it, and Taxi Driver is on, and you say, "Have you seen Taxi Driver?" or "Taxi Driver's on," and they give you that look, and all of a sudden you realize you've met somebody who fucking hasn't seen Taxi Driver. Like, okay, hold on. I'm gonna fill up your wine glass. How much beer do we have? I'm gonna go get some more beer. This thing is on in a half an hour. You gotta see it. I mean, it's one of those type of movies. That said, it's not for anybody, and it's not an easy film. It's a huge revelation to me watching this tonight with the scene with that Scott mentioned with Harvey Keitel and Jodie Foster. Just how uncomfortable that makes me, all that shit. And then I realized, well, those are the kind of movies I make. So it's just that huge, you've got to be true. It's got to be done. Movies like this have to be made, and maybe they're not meant to be enjoyed. My final thoughts are on it. I mean, I'm glad that you did the show, because I probably wouldn't have watched this for another few years, and it's taken me back, and it's actually given me some hope. It's like, yeah, there was a time when grittier movies were the shit, and those are the kind of movies I aim to make, and you get lost, you get hopeless out there trying to make really, quality work that maybe is imperfect and a little gritty and raw, and then, there's a whole generation of people looking to stream for free in HD, and it's very disheartening. But watching this took me back to a time when the cinema was very pure and honest to itself.
And Glenn, how about you? Your final thoughts of Taxi Drivers, and there's someone, what type of people would you recommend or not recommend watch this film?
I would recommend this to just about anyone.
Mm-hmm.
And mind you, I first saw this movie only like 5 years ago.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah, I had caught snippets of it here and there, but I had never seen the whole thing. Mm-hmm. And like 5, 6 years ago, I saw it. I was at a Half Price Books, I think it was, and they had a copy of it sitting there. And I'm like, I'm going to pick it up because I have never seen it all the way through. So I think it's one of those movies, especially now, where because it's 40 years old, there's a lot of people who haven't seen it because it's not something that's brought up in modern day talk anymore. People don't talk about Taxi Driver, and partly because what's De Niro doing? He's doing the Fockers meet the Fockers, in Fokker Falls. So they don't know the history of De Niro, and yes, Scorsese's still doing the same stuff, kind of, like with Departed and stuff, but it's these are films that people aren't being introduced to, and partly just because there's so much media out there now.
Yeah.
It's not just the fact that I'm not going to say there's more movies made, it's just the fact that you have access to so much stuff. I mean, even when I was a kid growing up and, I had the video store down the street, that's nothing compared to what I have at my fingertips on the computer. I mean, I could spend the rest of my life just watching cat videos, and I wouldn't get through them all. So the fact that there's so much stuff out there, this is the type of stuff you need to recommend to lots of people to show them, something dark and gritty, because as much in a way you can say this kind of has a happy ending, if you understand the character, you know that it's not.
Yeah.
he's quote unquote the hero, but he's still the same fucked up guy.
Yeah, he,
You
he
know,
he's just enjoying his afterglow.
and that's the thing. He's probably actually worse now, because now he'll buy into this whole I'm the hero.
Mm-hmm.
I cleaned up some of the scum in this city. So there's just so many people I think need to see this film.
And it's only a matter of time before he does it again too.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, it's in you have movies that try to be dark. You've got movies where they try to be, dark and gritty, but they just end up going for, let's just be super violent. And not saying this movie doesn't have its violence. I mean, that final scene, which I love the fact that the MPA made him make changes, which actually made it more graphic.
Yeah.
So, but you have movies where they're trying to be dark, and you end up with like The Purge 2, where they just think dark means let's just kill lots of people, and it's not really dark. So this is where you have it's dark because of all the psychological stuff going on with the character.
Yeah,
and you get that so rarely these days, where it's solely, I mean, so much of this movie it's just character story. I mean, the only action really in it is that final scene.
Yeah.
I mean, other than that, it's what you got the shopkeeper hitting the dead guy. That's the most action you get, up until that point. So, yeah, it's definitely a movie a lot of people need to see, because it's something you don't see in modern cinema much anymore. And if you do, you've got to go out of your way to do it. You've got to go to a place like by me. You've got to go down to the Oriental Theater. You got to go to those indie houses to see films where you have just such a character-driven piece. You don't get that much anymore. You get it occasionally, but most of it, it's we're gonna have lots of glitz and lots of glam, and and throw some big names in. And that's the thing too. When this was made, I mean, none of these people are really anybody. I mean, how many people really knew who Harvey Keitel was? Really knew who didn't? I mean, you knew when the movie came out, but when he was cast,
yeah.
he hadn't done much of anything. Boyle had done a little bit of stuff, but there's not like that A-lister in this film.
No.
I mean, the biggest star they have at this time would be Sybil Shepherd. Yeah. Which they kind of got just by accident, because their casting was, we want someone like Sybil Shepherd, and finally when casting said, why don't you just call her up? So. Yeah, it's definitely a movie worth checking out for just about anyone who claims to love film.
Right.
And if they don't like this movie, then they're a liar. Lying about the fact they love film, because I don't know how you can love film and not at least appreciate some degree of this movie. You can be uncomfortable, which I think is part of what some cinema should do.
Yeah, man.
Not all, but I mean that's one thing with art. In some cases, art should make you uncomfortable, because that's how you learn your own limits too.
Well,
you without actually going out and murdering a pimp.
Which we are not advocating here at all on the spoiler room. But no, I know exactly what you mean. If you don't feel uncomfortable at some point during this movie, put your psychologist on speed dial.
Yeah.
If you don't feel uncomfortable, then you are Travis Bickle.
Yeah.
Scott, your final thought on this? I know you've mentioned it, how personal this was, but your final thought, and would you agree? You pretty much recommend this to anyone who says, "Oh yeah, I love movies."
Well, Reno, Cole and Glenn, right fucking on, both of you. So holy shit, yeah, absolutely. You guys have, throughout the night, and especially in these closing statements, just like completely nailed it. Yeah, absolutely. If you claim to love film, yes, absolutely see this movie. I would recommend it to anybody who claims that. It is the great American movie, I think. It's brilliantly put together, brilliantly written, brilliantly acted, brilliantly directed. Also, if you want to see a slice of time, in a place and time of New York City, I mean, the two best movies to watch are Taxi Driver and a film from 1980 that is almost forgotten called Night of the Juggler.
Oh yeah.
Oh, it's such a great movie. And and also just I would recommend it to anybody who is not, again, that you don't want to. No one should want to emulate this character, but I would probably recommend it to anybody who has ever had feelings of loneliness, isolation, uh, awkwardness, depression, uh, which, Jesus Christ, isn't that just fucking everybody when you get down to it? There are people who feel it a little more profoundly than most. I mean, I know I'm actually, got it diagnosed and shit. But everybody has it to a certain degree. And I think that anybody who's ever had feelings like that, I would recommend this film. It's especially kind of the added thing today, being that we are now. It is, while we're doing this. This is the 40th anniversary of Taxi Driver. It's 2016. It is currently March. We are in the political primary season. We're seeing, not to get too political, but we're seeing a demagogue out there kind of capture the anger, the imaginations of an angry, ignorant populace. Would that have been the type of person that Travis Bickle would have gotten behind back in the day? He might have. Which is kind of frightening to imagine that the person who captures the attention of all the wrong attributes of this person is kind of in really becoming a major figure these days. And it just shows, whether he wins or loses, how prevalent that is.
Mm-hmm.
How prevalent it is in the world. It's a film that touches on so many things. It's so complex. It's such a psychological and emotional film that,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't even know. I know I ramble when I talk about this movie. I know I do, because I don't know where to begin. I don't know if I could ever say enough about it. It is really one of the greatest films ever made.
It is, and I read an article somewhere that quoted De Niro saying that Taxi Driver was going to be one of those films where he thinks that 50 years down the road, people will still be talking about it. Well, here it is, 40 years, and we are still talking about it. And there's so much in here that you could apply still to today. Don't think of it. This film is not overhyped, overrated. We are not just saying this because this is an older film. This film is that good. If you appreciate cinema, everybody here, all my guests here tonight, Spoiler Room crew, have put it very well, that if you appreciate cinema at all, you don't necessarily have to enjoy this film, but appreciate just the execution, how this was edited, how this was directed, the story, the acting, everything about this. You look at this film and you can see its influences over so many crime, drama, gritty, thriller, whatever you want, after it came out. You can see its influences still even today. People trying to capture that feel, and some are successful, most aren't. Because, yeah, a lot of people, I think of Taxi Driver as being a violent film, but that's because that last scene in the last act is so dramatic, so violent, so powerful, that sticks with you at the very end, which, is it keeps people talking, and that's what's going to stick with you and make you think about it hours later. You'll start thinking about the characters. So I would say yes. If you say you love film but haven't quite seen it yet, if you're a young film lover out there looking for something that's dark and truly gritty and don't mind something that's a big character driven piece, check out Taxi Driver. As you get the impression from everybody here, it is a classic for a reason, and it is one of those films where I think 10 years from now, people will still be talking about this film and still being able to apply the characters and what they do in this film to events of today. So I appreciate the crew here sitting and talking on another Big 4-0 special. Hope you've been enjoying these films as we flash back to 1976. Let's go down the row really quick to see where folks can find you crew members at when you're not here. Go ahead, Cole.
Oh, I'm on Facebook these days for the time being. Shadows and Lovers Productions, and we've got a new movie on the horizon called The Last Great Horror Movie coming down the pipe. Very excited about that. True indie horror. Also, you can find some of my tribute posters and digital art on Horror, which is also on Facebook. So Shadows and Lovers Productions and Horror, and keep a lookout for The Last Great Horror Movie. The trailer is on YouTube.
Awesome. And Glenn, go ahead.
You can find me on Facebook as well as on Twitter with Guy in a Bunker, or find me on YouTube, Guy in a Bunker. And hopefully, if I get off my butt and actually get the website, you'll be able to eventually find me at guyinabunker.com.
Awesome.
Right on.
Fantastic. And Scotty D, go.
You can catch me at movieocrity.com. That's where I try to post everything I'm involved with, podcasts, web series, articles I write, whatever. You can also check out the web series Movieocrity at vimeo.com/channels/Movieocrity, and my new kind of very short and sweet web series reaction shots over on YouTube.
Oh, those are fun.
Oh, thanks, buddy.
Make sure you check out all these fine folks' material. It's all really good stuff, and I am very lucky to not only have these crew members, but other crew members as well that you have heard on this show, which you can hear of our past episodes on specialmarkproductions.com, where we have all our past episodes. This is number 80 of the Spoiler Room. You can also catch my latest reviews of the Final Cut there. There's also a link to the playlist of my stuff that I do exclusively for We Live Film, where catch it this week. Recently, I just did a review of Plan 9, which was the remake of Plan 9 from Outer Space. And that review will be live at the time of this recording. It'll be live tomorrow. So you can check that out. Also, we are partnered with a site called nerdslant.com. Check out those guys. Great stuff there. And, of course, on iTunes and Stitcher Radio, you can find the Spoiler Room, where the conversation is fresh, but we do spoil the movies. Say goodnight, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.